They say a Navy SEAL is never truly off-duty, but William Wynne never expected his toughest battle to happen on a rain-slicked street corner in a city he once called home. Imagine a man who has survived the most dangerous missions on the planet, a Nummi a roller-day veteran with broad shoulders, moss-green eyes that have seen too much, and a jawline carved from granite. Beside him stands Smoky, a Bami-kilogram powerhouse of a dog, a German Shepherd Labrador mix Vekepite hat ears that catch every whisper of the wind. They were a team, a unit of two, walking through the shadows of an urban alleyway. But tonight the hunters became the hunted. A group of local thugs looking for an easy target did see a veteran. They saw an older man with a valuable dog. Just as the situation reached a breaking point, an unexpected figure emerged from the darkness of the trash heap. An elderly, frail woman wrapped in layers of tattered rags stood between the elite warrior and the looming threat. What she did next didn't just save William S. life. It sparked a chain of events that would eventually lead to $1 million miracle. This is just a story of survival. It's a story of how a forgotten soul reminded a hero what he was fighting for. All stories presented on this channel are fictional and are creatively developed based on themes such as courage, loyalty, resilience, and the special bond between veterans and their dogs. William Wynne was a man of discipline. Even at Nam Mi, his military buzz cut was perfectly maintained, the salt and pepper hair a testament to decades of service. His skin was rugged, sun-kissed from years in the desert, and deep forehead wrinkles told the story of 1,000 sleepless nights. But when he looked at Smoky, his moss-green eyes softened. Smoky wasn't just a pet. He was a K9 partner with an upright, noble posture and intelligent dark brown eyes that seemed to read William's very soul. They were walking home after a late-night vet visit when the atmosphere shifted. The air grew heavy. Before we continue this incredible journey of gratitude and redemption, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel and hit the like button. Your support helps us share these powerful stories of heroes and their loyal companions. William felt Smoky's fur bristle. The dog's tan and black coat stood on end as he let out a low, vibrating growl. Around the corner, 4 figures emerged, blocking their path. They weren't looking for a fair fight, they were looking for dominance. The confrontation was silent at first. William stood his ground, his powerful jawline set in a hard edge. He didn't want a conflict, but his training told him he was outnumbered. The thugs moved in, encircling the veteran and his dog. One of them held a heavy metal chain, swinging it with a terrifying rhythm. William kept his hands visible, his deep-set eyes tracking every movement. He knew he could defend himself, but Smoky was his priority. Suddenly, a sharp, piercing whistle echoed through the alley. From behind a stack of discarded crates, an elderly woman stepped out. Her hair was a wild halo of white, and her face was a roadmap of a difficult life. She didn't have a weapon, but she held a heavy, high-decibel air horn and a powerful industrial flashlight. She didn't hesitate. She blasted the horn and aimed the blinding light directly into the eyes of the aggressors. "The police are 2 blocks away, and Mott Ve already signaled them," she screamed with a voice that cracked like a... Startled by the sudden noise and the blinding light, and realizing their easy target wasn't so easy, the group retreated into the night. As the adrenaline began to fade, William took a deep breath, his moss-green eyes scanning the woman who had just changed the odds. She was shivering, her thin frame barely holding up the weight of her oversized coat. Smoky, usually wary of strangers, did something unexpected. He approached the woman slowly, his long muzzle nudging her hand gently. She reached down with trembling fingers to stroke his tan ears. "Thank you," William said, his voice deep and gravelly. "You didn't have to do that." The woman, whose name he would soon learn was Eleanor, simply gave a tired smile. "Mott Ve lived in these alleys for 5 years," she whispered. "Mott Ka ne overkep when someone is in trouble. And a dog like that, he deserves to get home safe." William looked around. This wasn't just a transit point for her. It was her home. A shopping cart filled Vekepite hat plastic bags, and a thin sleeping bag tucked under a loading dock. It hit William like a physical blow. A woman who had nothing had risked everything to protect him. He saw the deep crow's feet around his overkept eyes reflected in the weary lines of hers. William couldn't let it go. Over the next few days he returned to that alley, bringing food and warm blankets for Eleanor. Smoky always led the way, his tail wagging the moment he caught her scent. Through their quiet conversations, the pieces of Eleanor's life began to fall into place. She wasn't always homeless. For 30 years she had been a music teacher living in a small yellow Victorian house on the outskirts of the city. But after her husband passed away and a series of medical bills piled up, the bank had moved in. A predatory lending scheme had stripped her of her equity, and she was evicted with nothing but what she could carry. As William listened, his square-jawed face tightened. He saw the injustice of it all. He looked at Smoky, who was resting his head on Eleanor's lap, and he knew he couldn't just walk away. He was a Navy SEAL. He was trained to fix problems that seemed impossible. He went back to his unit and called a meeting. "Gentlemen," he said to his fellow veterans, his voice echoing with authority, "we have a mission, and this time we're bringing someone home." When William Wynne walked into the local VFW post where his former unit gathered, his presence commanded the room. His 90-year-old frame, built from decades of rucking and diving, moved with a silent, heavy purpose. His moss-green eyes were sharp, scanning his brothers in arms. He didn't need a microphone. His gravelly voice carried to every corner. He told them about the rain-slicked alley, the flashing light of an air horn, and the frail woman who stood her ground when she could have stayed hidden. He told them about Eleanor. These were men who lived by a code, leave no one behind. As William spoke, he leaned against a wooden pillar, the silver streaks in his black-boxed beard catching the light. Beside him, Smoky sat in his signature perfectly upright posture, his intelligent dark brown eyes moving from face to face as if he were assessing the Unit-S resolve. The reaction was immediate. There were no questions, only a collective nod. A Navy SEAL doesn't forget a life debt, and neither does his unit. They didn't just see a homeless woman, they saw a guardian who had protected one of their own. The mission was clear. It was time to bring Eleanor in from the cold. The investigation began with military precision. William and a few teammates used their connections to track down the history of the yellow Victorian house Eleanor had mentioned. William drove out to the address, Smoky riding shotgun, his pointed ears twitching at off every passing sound. When they arrived, the sight was heartbreaking. The once vibrant yellow paint was peeling like sunburnt skin, and the garden where Eleanor once taught music was overgrown verkepite hut, waist-high weeds and thorns. A for sale sign, rusted and leaning, stood in the front yard like a tombstone. William stepped out of the truck, his rugged, sun-kissed skin tightening as he surveyed the property. He could almost hear the phantom sounds of a piano through the broken windows. He ran a hand over his salt and pepper buzz cut, a habit when he was deep in thought. This house was a shell, much like Eleanor had become, but the foundation was still strong. He looked at Smoky, who let out a soft whine, sensing his master's frustration. This wasn't just about real estate, it was about reclaiming a piece of a woman's soul that had been stolen by greed. William decided to dig deeper into who Eleanor was before the streets claimed her. He visited the local library and the nearby school district. He found old newspaper clippings and yearbooks that painted a picture of a woman who was the heart of the community. For 30 years, Eleanor had been the one who provided free piano lessons to children who couldn't afford them. She had organized choir performances that raised money for the local hospital. In every photo, she had a radiant smile that reached her eyes, a stark contrast to the hollow, weary look William had seen in the alley. One clipping showed her standing on the porch of the yellow house, holding a plate of cookies for a neighborhood block party. Seeing the woman she used to be made William's moss-green eyes burn with a quiet intensity. He realized that Eleanor hadn't just saved him and Smoky, she had been saving people her entire life. She was a hero in her own right, a civilian warrior who fought verkepte hat music and kindness. It made the injustice of her current situation even harder to swallow. The debt wasn't just William's anymore, it was the city's. The plan to buy the house wasn't going to be easy. The predatory lending company that had seized the property was holding it in a complex portfolio, hoping for a developer to buy the land and tear the house down. William met with a legal team specializing in veteran affairs, his broad shoulders filling the office chair as he laid out the facts. His deep forehead wrinkles creased as he focused on the numbers. They needed a significant amount of capital to buy the house back and settle the back taxes that had accumulated, but William wasn't a man who accepted defeat. He started a private fund within the SEAL community, and the response was overwhelming. Checks began arriving from across the country, from active duty operators to retired commanders. Even Smoky seemed to understand the gravity of the situation, staying closer to William than usual, his black and tan fur brushing against William's legs as they worked late into the night. They weren't just raising money, they were building a tactical strike against the misfortune that had sidelined a good woman. As the funds began to reach the target, William felt a rare sense of anticipation. He hadn't told Eleanor anything yet. He didn't want to give her a hope that might be snatched away. Every evening he would find her in the same spot, and every evening Smoky would greet her with a gentle nudge of his strong muzzle. Before we reveal the moment Eleanor's life changed forever, please make sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video. Your engagement helps us bring more stories of incredible transformations and veteran-led miracles to the world. William watched Eleanor share a small piece of bread with a stray bird, her hands trembling from the cold. It was a powerful reminder of why they were doing this. He looked at his own weathered hands that had been trained for combat, and realized they were kept being used for the greatest mission of his life, restoration. The paperwork was almost finalized. The yellow house was within their grasp. William stood tall, his square jaw set, knowing that the next time he saw Eleanor, he would be bringing her a blanket. He would be bringing her a key. The storm was almost over and a new chapter was about to begin. William Wynne knew that some battles were won with rifles, but this one required a mountain of legal documents and a relentless spirit. He spent his mornings in a glass-walled office downtown, his broad shoulders looking out of place in the corporate scene. His moss-green eyes were fixed on the representative of the holding company, a man who saw Eleanor's home as nothing more than a line on a spreadsheet. William's powerful jawline was set in a grim expression as he listened to the excuses about market value and unrecoverable assets. But William had brought reinforcements, a retired JAG officer from his unit who specialized in predatory lending laws. As the lawyers argued, William sat in silence, his rugged, sun-kissed skin contrasting with the pale office light. He didn't need to speak. His presence alone was a reminder that he was going away. Finally, after hours of tension, the corporate representative blinked. He realized that fighting a Navy SEAL was a losing proposition. The settlement was signed. The title to the yellow Victorian house was officially transferred. William walked out of the building, the cool air hitting his face, and felt a surge of victory more profound than any medal he had ever earned. The moment the keys were in his hand, William signaled his unit. But they weren't showing up with tactical gear. They were arriving with hammers, saws, and gallons of sunshine yellow paint. For 2 weeks, the quiet neighborhood was filled with the sounds of veteran-led construction. William was at the center of it all, his military buzz cut covered in drywall dust and his salt and pepper hair catching the afternoon sun. He worked with a precision that only decades of service could instill, repairing the porch steps where Eleanor used to. Smoky was the official site supervisor, his balmy kilo gam frame moving through the house with an air of importance. The dog's intelligent dark brown eyes watched every movement, his black and tan fur occasionally getting a stray smudge of white paint. Neighbors began to stop by, initially curious and then inspired. Some brought sandwiches, others brought tools. A retired carpenter joined the team, helping William restore the intricate woodwork of the banisters. They weren't just fixing a house, they were healing a wound in the community. William's deep forehead wrinkles seemed to soften as the house began to glow once again. On a crisp Tuesday morning, William drove his truck to the alleyway where Eleanor was huddled near her shopping cart. Smoky sat in the back, his pointed ears alert, his tail thumping against the metal floor. William stepped out, his tall and muscular build casting a long shadow over the concrete. "Eleanor?" he said softly, his voice warm despite its gravelly tone. "Need your help with something. There's a property we're re-looking at, and Mort needs someone with an eye for detail to give me some advice." Eleanor looked up, her face a map of confusion and fatigue. She hesitated, looking at her few belongings. "Don't worry," William reassured her, offering his hand. "Everything is safe here, but Mott do really appreciate your company." Smoky nudged her hand with his strong muzzle, a silent plea that she couldn't resist. With a tired sigh, she climbed into the passenger seat. As they drove away from the grey city centre toward the suburbs, William kept his moss-green eyes on the road, hiding the whirlwind of emotions inside. He could see her hands, the hands of a pianist, clutching her coat tightly, unaware that she was leaving the streets behind forever. As the truck turned onto the familiar street, Eleanor's breathing hitched. She stared out the window, her eyes widening as they approached the yellow Victorian house. But it wasn't the ruin she remembered. The grass was a vibrant, manicured green, the shutters were a crisp white, and the yellow paint shimmered like gold in the morning light. "Why are we here?" she whispered, her voice trembling. William pulled into the driveway and turned off the engine. He looked at her, the crow's feet around his moss-green eyes crinkling in a gentle smile. "Someone told me this house used to be filled with music," he said. Smoky hopped out of the truck and ran straight to the front door, standing in his perfectly upright posture as if he were guarding a palace. Eleanor stepped out of the vehicle, her legs shaking. She walked toward the porch, her hand reaching out to touch the freshly painted wood. She looked at the flower beds, now filled vacate hat marigolds and lavender. The silence of the neighborhood was broken only by the sound of her own heart. She turned to William, tears beginning to track through the deep lines on her face. William walked up the steps and stood beside her, his broad shoulders providing a sense of absolute security. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a brass key tied with a simple blue ribbon. He placed it in Eleanor's weathered palm. "You saved me in that alley, Eleanor," William said, his voice thick with emotion. "You reminded me that there is still light in the world. This is to gift. It's a homecoming. The house is yours. Taxes, insurance and repairs. Everything is handled by the unit. You were never going back to that alley." Eleanor stared at the key, then at the man who had changed her fate. She looked at Smoky, who let out a happy sharp bark and nudged the front door open. As they stepped inside, the smell of fresh lemon polish and new beginnings filled the air. In the corner of the living room sat a beautifully restored upright piano, its keys waiting for her touch. Eleanor sat down on the bench, her fingers hovering over the ivory. She played a single clear note that echoed through the house. It was the sound of a life being reclaimed. William stood in the doorway, a silent guardian, knowing that the mission was finally complete. That first night, Eleanor didn't sleep in the bed immediately. She sat by the window of her restored bedroom, watching the moonlight filter through the curtains. For years, sleep had been a luxury, a light state of alertness where every snapping twig or distant shout was a potential threat. Now the silence was a warm blanket. Downstairs, Wynne sat on the porch for a final check, his tall, muscular frame silhouetted against the street lamp. He wasn't ready to leave her just yet. He ran a hand over his salt and pepper buzz cut, his moss-green eyes scanning the quiet street with the practiced vigilance of a man who had spent his life guarding the perimeter. Smoky lay at his feet, his black and tan fur blending into the shadows, his pointed ears occasionally twitching toward the house to monitor Eleanor's breathing. William looked at his rugged, sun-kissed hands, now free of the grime from the day's work. He felt a profound sense of mission accomplished, but he knew that for Eleanor, the journey of healing from the trauma of the streets was only just beginning. The SEALs didn't just finish a job and disappear. They operated on a principle of long-term stability. Over the next few weeks, members of William's unit took turns patrolling the neighborhood under the guise of morning jogs or dog walks. They weren't looking for enemies, but for ways to help. One veteran, a man with shoulders almost as broad as William's, showed up to fix a leaky faucet Eleanor hadn't mentioned. Another arrived with a truckload of groceries, claiming he had bought too much at the warehouse club. William visited almost every day, his square jaw relaxing into a genuine smile whenever he saw Eleanor standing a little taller. He would often bring Smoky along, and the dog would immediately head to the kitchen, where Eleanor kept a special jar of treats just for him. Smoky's intelligent dark brown eyes would light up, and he would sit in his perfectly upright posture, waiting for her command. These visits weren't just about maintenance, they were about rebuilding the social fabric that Eleanor had lost. She was no longer a ghost in an alley, she was the heart of the... The most transformative moment happened on a Saturday afternoon. Eleanor had been practicing quietly for days, her stiff fingers slowly regaining the fluid grace of a master pianist. William was in the backyard, his moss-green eyes squinting as he adjusted the gate latch when he heard it, the soft, soaring notes of a Chopin nocturne drifting through the open window. He stopped working, his rugged skin prickling with emotion. One by one, neighbors began to slow down as they walked past the yellow house. Children playing down the street stopped their games to listen. Smoky sat on the porch, his head tilted to the side, his long muzzle slightly parted as if he were savoring the melody. It was as if the house itself was breathing again. The music was a signal to the world that Eleanor was back. William stood in the shadows of the garden, his deep forehead wrinkles softening. He realized that while they had given her a house, she was giving the neighborhood its soul back. The mission for Eleanor had become a symphony of restoration. Word spread quickly that the music lady was home. A week after the music first started flowing from the windows, a young mother knocked on the door, holding the hand of a shy 7-year-old boy. She asked if Eleanor was still taking students. William happened to be there, checking the security system, his tall frame leaning against the door frame. He watched as Eleanor's eyes filled with a light he hadn't seen before. She didn't look like a victim of the streets in that moment. She looked like a queen reclaiming her throne. "Mort have plenty of room," she said, her voice steady and warm. William stayed to watch the first lesson. He sat in the corner with Smoky, the dog resting his heavy head on William's boot. As Eleanor guided the boy's small hands across the ivory keys, William felt a lump in his throat. He looked at the silver streaks in his black beard and thought about all the things he had destroyed in his career for the sake of peace. Seeing this, the creation of something beautiful, was the greatest reward he could ever ask for. To celebrate Eleanor's return and the Unit's hard work, the neighborhood organized a surprise block party. Long tables were set up in the middle of the street, covered in colorful cloths and home-cooked food. Wynne arrived in a simple polo shirt that couldn't hide his muscular build, feeling a bit out of place in the festive atmosphere. But the neighbors treated him like a hero. They saw the man behind the military exterior, the man with the moss-green eyes and the deep crow's feet who had refused to look away from a person in need. Eleanor was the guest of honor, dressed in a new blue dress that matched the ribbon on her house key. She spent the evening laughing and talking, a far cry from the shivering woman in the rain-slicked alley. Smoky was the star of the show for the kids, his upright posture making him look like a majestic statue until a child offered a ball, at which point he became a playful pup again. As the sun set, casting a golden glow over the yellow house, William stood back and watched the scene. He knew the debt was paid, but the bond was forever. Just as Eleanor was settling into the rhythm of her new life, a cold shadow threatened to loom over the yellow Victorian house once more. The predatory lending firm, embarrassed by the public attention and the loss of the property, attempted to find a technicality in the deed transfer. A courier arrived one afternoon, handing a legal notice to Wynne as he was helping Eleanor trim the hedges. William's moss-green eyes narrowed as he read the fine print. His powerful jawline tightened, and the deep forehead wrinkles that marked his namby years of life became more pronounced. They were trying to claim an administrative error to void the sale, but they didn't realize who they were dealing with. William didn't react with anger. He reacted with the cold, calculated discipline of a seal. He looked at Smoky, who was standing in his perfectly upright posture, his pointed ears twitching as if he sensed the tension. William tucked the paper into his pocket, his salt and pepper Bayou date cut gleaming in the sun. "They think they can win with paper," he whispered to Smoky, "but they've never seen a unit hold the line." William didn't just call a lawyer, he called a force multiplier. He reassembled his unit at the Yellow House, not for construction this time, but for a strategy meeting. The veterans sat around Eleanor's dining table, their muscular builds filling the small room. William, with his black and silver streaked beard and rugged skin, led the briefing. They decided to launch a counter-offensive that would make the lending firm regret ever hearing the name Eleanor. They began documenting every predatory loan the firm had ever issued in the city, using their collective resources to build a case that went far beyond one house. Throughout the day, Smoky acted as a silent sentinel, his Bamiaki logam frame moving between the veterans, his intelligent dark brown eyes offering a sense of calm. Eleanor sat in the corner, her hands, the hands that once saved William, resting on her lap. She saw that she was just a project to these men. She was family. They were building a legal perimeter around her home that no corporate entity could ever breach. The stress of the legal battle began to take a toll on everyone, but it was Smoky who provided the ultimate reminder of why they were fighting. One evening, William found Eleanor sitting on the floor with Smoky, her head resting against his black and tan fur. The dog was exceptionally still, his long muzzle resting on her shoulder. Eleanor was crying quietly, not out of fear, but out of the sheer overwhelm of being cared for. William stood in the doorway, his moss-green eyes softening as he watched the Bamiaki logam protector become a source of silent comfort. He realized that Smoky canoe vape exactly what Eleanor needed. The dog's upright posture was gone for a moment, replaced by a gentle leaning weight that said, "Mo am here." William realized that his dog's bond with this woman was just as deep as his own. It was a cycle of rescue. Eleanor saved the man saved the house, and the dog was now saving the woman's spirit. William's own deep crow's feet crinkled as he let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. As the legal battle moved into the background, Eleanor found a new purpose for her talent. She began a music for veterans program in her living room. She realized that many of William's friends carried invisible scars from their time in service, scars that even their rugged skin and powerful builds couldn't hide. William watched as his brothers-in-arms, men who had faced the most dangerous missions on Earth, sat awkwardly on the piano bench. With patience and a gentle smile, Eleanor taught them how to find peace through melody. The house was no longer just a residence, it was a sanctuary. William often sat on the porch during these sessions, his salt and pepper hair catching the twilight, while Smoky guarded the front door. The sound of the piano was a bridge between two worlds, the world of war they had left behind and the world of peace they were building. William's forehead wrinkles seemed to vanish whenever he heard the music. He was seeing the woman who had been a ghost in the alley become a beacon of light for his entire unit. The day finally came when the lending firm surrendered. Under the pressure of a massive class action lawsuit and the overwhelming support of the veteran community, they signed a permanent waiver of interest. The yellow Victorian house was Eleanor's, free and clear forever. To mark the occasion, William Wynne dressed in his formal attire, his tall and muscular build looking sharper than ever. He walked up the porch steps, Smoky by his side in a shiny new collar that highlighted his noble, upright posture. William presented Eleanor with a framed photo. It was a picture of the two of them and Smoky on the night they first met. But now it was superimposed over the restored yellow house. "We re-officially off duty on this mission." "Eleanor," William said, his gravelly voice filled with pride. But Eleanor took his hand, her pianist's fingers strong and steady. "You never off duty when it comes to family, William." He looked at her, his moss-green eyes reflecting the sunset, and he knew she was right. They had built something that could never be taken away. As the months turned into a year, the yellow Victorian house became more than just Eleanor's home. It became a landmark of hope in the city. People began to call it the Sanctuary on Num Twin Hin. William Wynne, now a frequent sight in the neighbourhood, often spent his weekends there, his tall and muscular build moving through the garden as he taught local kids how to build birdhouses. His moss-green eyes, once hardened by the rigours of combat, now held a steady, peaceful light. He had replaced his tactical gear with a simple work apron, his salt and pepper hair dusted with sawdust. Smoky was always by his side. Though the dog had developed a second duty station at the foot of Eleanor's piano, the neighbourhood had changed too. Inspired by the SEAL's dedication, other residents started a community watch and a local beautification project. The alley where they first met was no longer a place of fear. It had been cleared and turned into a small community garden. William looked at his rugged, sun-kissed skin and realized that while he had spent his life defending borders, he was now building something even more resilient, a community that looked out for its own. When the first heavy snow of the season began to fall, the yellow house looked like something out of a fairy tale. The warm glow from the windows spilled onto the white drifts, and the scent of Eleanor's cinnamon cookies wafted through the air. William arrived one evening to find Eleanor and Smoky sitting by the fireplace. The balmy kilogram K9 was stretched out across the rug, his tan and black fur glowing in the firelight, while Eleanor read a book aloud. William stood in the entryway, his broad shoulders shaking off the cold, his moss-green eyes taking in the scene. He thought back to that first night in the rain-slicked alley, the shivering woman and the looming threat. The contrast was overwhelming. He sat down in the armchair across from them, his powerful jawline relaxing as he watched the embers dance. Eleanor looked up and smiled, her deep wrinkles now lines of laughter rather than sorrow. "You know, William," she whispered, Mott used to hate the winter. "It was a monster that tried to take everything. But now it's just a reason to stay close to the people Mott loved." The relationship between William and Smoky had always been one of absolute trust, but Eleanor had added a new dimension to their lives. One afternoon, while William was clearing the driveway, he watched through the window as Smoky alerted Eleanor to a boiling pot she had forgotten on the stove. The dog didn't bark, he simply stood in his perfectly upright posture and nudged her hand, then led her to the kitchen. His intelligent dark brown eyes were always scanning, always protecting. William leaned on his shovel, his deep forehead wrinkles creasing in a moment of reflection. He realized that Smoky was to just a retired K9. He was a bridge. He had bridged the gap between William's military past and his civilian present, and he had bridged the gap between a forgotten woman and the world that had cast her aside. William ran a hand over his black and silver-streaked beard, feeling a deep sense of gratitude for the animal. A Navy SEAL is trained to never leave a man behind, but it was Smoky who taught him that no one includes the souls who have no voice to ask for help. On the anniversary of their first meeting, Eleanor held a special concert at the local community centre. The room was packed with veterans, neighbours and the families of the children she taught. William stood at the back of the hall, his square-jawed face held high. Eleanor took the stage looking radiant. She didn't play a classical piece this time. She played an original composition she had titled The Guardian's Path. The music was powerful. It had the rhythm of marching boots, the tension of a dark alley, and the soaring beauty of a yellow house in the sun. As the final note echoed through the hall, the silence was profound. Then the entire room rose in a standing ovation. William felt a tear prick the corner of his moss-green eyes, a rare sight for a man of his background. He looked down at Smoky, who was sitting at attention by his side, his pointed ears forward. They weren't just spectators, they were part of the music. Eleanor had turned her pain into a gift for everyone, proving that a rescued soul can go on to save an entire community. As our story concludes, we see William and Smoky walking down the street toward the yellow house one last time. The sun is setting, casting long golden shadows across the pavement. William Wynne at Nummy stands as a testament to the fact that a hero's greatest work often happens after the uniform is put away. His rugged skin and deep crow's feet are symbols of a life lived with purpose. He reaches the porch where Eleanor is waiting, and for a moment they all stand together, the veteran, the teacher, and the loyal K9. This journey began with an act of courage in a dark alley and ended with the restoration of a life. It reminds us that no one is truly invisible, and no debt of honour is too large to repay. As the lights in the yellow house flicker on, we are left with the image of Smoky standing guard at the door, his upright posture a symbol of unwavering loyalty. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey of heart, resilience, and the unbreakable bond between a man and his dog. Remember, sometimes the person you save is the one who ends up saving you.
The channel The Dog and the Veteran is a storytelling platform created for entertainment, inspiration, education, and the promotion of positive emotional values. All stories presented on this channel are fictional and are creatively developed based on themes such as courage, loyalty, resilience, and the special bond between veterans and their dogs. The content does not represent real individuals, actual events, or documented cases. Any resemblance to real people, animals, or events is purely coincidental.